G'day guys, welcome back to SuperCoach with DR and welcome to the Round 16 Stock Market video. Hope you're having a cracking week so far. Well, in good news, the buys are now behind us. Don't need to worry about that anymore. It is back to a little bit of normality, if that is even a thing in SuperCoach, as I've mentioned many times previously. And for many of us, this is a week where we are looking to make our final upgrades. Super exciting time, a little bit stressful because these decisions may make or break our season. Do you go your Petruckers, your Libbers as that final Uber? Do you look to save a little bit of coin and go an absolute pod? Someone like Luke Parker, who you see on the screen here. Are you looking for someone to be that 23rd man? Benny Keys, Harry Himmelberg. There are a few sneaky options this week that you could look to bring in as that cover. Unfortunately, if you're looking for a nice rookie downgrade option, the cupboard is pretty bare, so I think we do need to be pretty inventive this week. But as I mentioned, this may be one of the most crucial SuperCoach stock market videos for the year, because these final choices could be the difference between a top 10k finish, 5k finish, or you may even be looking to push into that top 1k. So that's it for now, guys. I'm going to keep the intro pretty short. Remember to check out the SuperCoach Swordplay potty. Janice and I recorded that last night. It goes for about an hour 40 minutes, but it is jam-packed full of great advice, lots of laughs and banter, as always. And thank you to anyone that already has checked that out. We really do appreciate the love. We've just been getting stronger and stronger with the potty each week. So thank you very much for that, guys. But I think that's pretty much it for the housekeeping, guys. All the best of luck for this week. Let's see who's sitting at the top of the 500k plus defenders list. Alrighty, here we go. Now, in my opinion, and I've had this list here for the last couple of weeks, there are 4 standout options with possibly a couple of others chasing their tail, and I've got the top 4 symbol on them. The top 1% of coaches have clearly made their choices as well for the top 4, with Dacos selected in 99.9% of the top 1% sides, Dawson's in 97.3%, Stewart in 97%, and 89.4% of those coaches also owns Sinclair. Then there's a massive drop off to the bloke at the top of this list in Luke Ryan. He's in 24.3% of the top 1% sides, and didn't he have a day out last week? It was pretty disgusting, just kept on kicking back to him, so I've got the seagull on him. Seems to be a good option, back in form at the moment. Ridley is making me despise him more and more as the season progresses. He continues to pump out fantastic scores after his concussion game. You can thank me for this. I seem to trade out blokes, they turn to gold. But in all seriousness, what an amazing comeback by the Riddler. He passed the Ridley test this week, which some people were concerned about. Just looks so confident down back. He's owning that back line now. A little bit of talk that Zerk Thatcher is under an injury cloud. Will that affect him? Well, I just don't think so at the moment, because he's passed most of the tests over the last 5 weeks have been put in front of him, so seems to be a really solid selection. I watched Sinclair live on the weekend. He is elite, loves the old 1-2, gets to smart spots on the ground, uses the ball well, has found some more consistency to his game, and we're seeing some more semi-ceiling type scores, which is nice. Fantastic buy, in my opinion. Dawson absolutely dominated against the Pies. Should have had the chance to potentially kick the winner after the siren. Not to be, though, which is really unfortunate, as that 150 could have been a 175, but a lot of if, buts, maybes. At the end of the day, he still killed it and would have shared best on ground honors, with the man below him in King Dacos. Another phenomenal game and well in Brownlow contention. We've all got him, though, as we mentioned before. Houston and Dale are the 2 pod options here, both with 119 break even. Dale has an ownership of 3.4%, and Houston is owned by just 2% of coaches. These are the blokes that you look to select as a lone wolf type move. Doc, he's only returned 3 sub-tons since he returned from injury in round 7. They've been 2 scores in the 90s, 1 low score in the 70s, so pretty consistent. Also has a pair of 111s, 124, 135 in there, so scoring well and spewing. I didn't see much of this again, similar to Ridley as an owner. I have him averaging in the top 5 to 10 range for defenders from here on out. And Tommy Stewart, he's that safe as houses type pick, as I say every week. Never seems to pump out a bad score. Great floor, great ceiling. Another one of the big 4 in my opinion. On to the defenders, 250 to 500k, and at the top of the list, we have Will Day. Went bang last week, punched out his biggest score of the season with a 141, scored 109 the week before against the Lions, and this is the Will Day that we purchased, free from opposition attention, spending some time through the midfield and off half-back. really seems to be the perfect mix for him. 29 touches, 9 marks, 4 tackles was a great performance. Has a decent fixture coming up as well. A big relief for owners as he was looking like a fake premium, and he still may be to some degree, but all of a sudden he should be back past 500k again after this week. A very nice comeback from the young man. Seamus Mitchell rewarded those that stuck fat with him during the bye period to knock out a 98, which was his best score of the season as well. Looks fantastic coming off halfback with his run and carry. They like the ball in his hands. Loves to take the game on. Sam Mitchell actually mentioned that he'd grabbed his spot with both hands and was an automatic inclusion when he missed the week earlier on. It was a no-brainer to bring him straight back in. I know that Janeth is using him as a defensive forward cover for the rest of the year with his defensive forward loop, so certainly an option to do that. Or else, if you need to bring in a primo, you can move him on. But if you can, wait a week, squeeze out some more coin. Harris Andrews played one of the best defensive games you'll ever see the other night. By far the most dominant man on the ground. Nothing got past him. Was on track to break the record for intercept marks before slightly slowing down. If he didn't mark it, he spoiled it. Just was a brick wall. A joy to watch as a Lions supporter. And a subtle reminder to the All-Australian selectors that this man should very much be in contention. But what do we think as a SuperCoach selection? Well, the word consistency certainly doesn't come to mind. At the end of the day, he's a key defender. 39, 87, 45, and then that massive 157 last week. As you can see, with Harris, you get the good, the bad, and the ugly. He does have a ceiling with a 122 and 130 to go along with that monster against the Saints, but they're just too few and far between for my liking. You could get him as your 23rd cover man for those ceiling games, but he doesn't possess DPP like Himmelberg type, which is another reason why I'd lean towards saying no to the Andrews pick. Elliot Yeo, well, what do you say? I had the roll the dice and the caution symbol on him last week, and unfortunately, for those that did decide to roll the dice on Yeo, you lost, out for 4 weeks. It's a killer blow for those low on trades, but we all know the risks associated with selecting Yeo and can't really complain when he goes down. Now, Jarman Impey, he is a real pod. Great starting pick in my forward line. I think it was a couple of years back now, but he's gone 100 plus in his last 4 games and made 100k in the process. 112, 105, 106, and 101 last week. Really flying under the radar, playing a friendly defensive role, averaging 29 touches over the last 4 with a really nice kick to handball ratio. The risk here is that if the pick doesn't work, it's really going to hurt given his low ownership. But if you believe in the role and his scoring output, if you believe that's sustainable, then feel free to bring him in. The Shees obviously had the bye last week, so if you held him through that, you're obviously planning on holding him for the rest of the season. A great D6/7 swing with, say, Himmelberg, and still a decent on-field option in his own right. 93 and 103 in his last 2. Think that's all good. Himmelberg, the man himself, look, I think he's the ultimate 23rd swingman to have on his side. Pair him up with a defensive forward loop and you are laughing. Available at under 400k with enough data from last year to suggest that he can score well in this defensive role. Look, there are no guarantees that he continues to play down back, but again, in my opinion, this is the most likely scenario that he does stay down back. If you play your cards right with the DPP, then Harry can actually cover on 3 lines. I'd ignore the projected score there as I expect him to average 90 plus from here. Should take some kick-ins, has the ability to intercept. I watched him live in Canberra. He is a lovely mark. Also loves to take those long kicks down the line to a contest, which usually delivers some nice SuperCoach points. In saying that, scores of 103, 88, and 72 since moving down back again aren't fantastic, but I expect him to really warm into the role again and to end the season well. Far from a guaranteed pick, and I stress that I would much rather have him as a swingman that you can use to loop and provide cover, but he's going to be welcomed into DR's Rusty Spoons this week. I hope he goes well. If not, look, his cover, and hopefully he'll play at least at a bare minimum, play week upon week, and we can jag a nice score out of him. Weddle should be a reliable cover if you decide to hold on to him, but at the same time, he is right for the picking. For most of us, he's done his job. Time to say goodbye and welcome in probably the last of our premiums. Adam Sard had a consistent last month, but unfortunately they're all ladies. We haven't seen a ton since round 4, after he tummed up for the first 4 rounds of the season. One we thought we may have been a bad miss early on, but Now we all breathe a sigh of relief that we weren't tempted into starting him. A massive, massive fall from SuperCoach Grace. And another one of my exes, Nazaya, has really found form and now playing how I expected him or hoped that he would to start off the season. Janeth jumped on again, and apart from low 59 in round 14 against the Tigers in wet conditions, he scored a 113, 100, 119 and a 116. Has a great role, taking kickouts, distributing well, finding a lot of the ball. Added DPP for flexibility is another bonus, so I do not mind Naz as a budget type pick. On to the defenders under 250k, and as you can see here, only the two names. Chesser has turned into a bit of a running joke with the way he scores. Nothing else to put there but the poo symbol. And the Pelican just couldn't get near it in West Coast demolition last week. Well, Sydney's demolition of West Coast last week, which came at a bad time for those owners who are fielding the 18 and had to take his score. I'm stating the obvious here, but certainly not a buyer's market. I haven't included him here, but I highly recommend that you check out the SuperCoach Swordplay potty for information on a bloke who both Janeth and I have traded in this week. He's a non-playing defensive forward from West Coast, 102,400. After you listen, you'll realise that there is some method behind the madness there. So if you haven't already checked that out, make sure that you do. On to the midfielders, 500k plus, and this is where the big boys are at, and some really crucial decisions, particularly if you're looking to finalise your last midfield position. Now, at the top of the list, we have Luke Parker. A great shout from Jonathan about a month ago now. Super pod, only in 1% of sides, and aside from a low score of 77 in round 11, he hasn't gone below 100 since round 6. In last month, we've also seen some real captaincy scores, 136, 145, and 134 in red hot form at the moment, and shouldn't go below triple figures too often anyway. Jelly, look, this is just personal opinion, but he's on my never again list. See Elliot Yo. But look, if you're crazy enough and you love to take a risk, he scored 164 in his last game and again is in red hot form. But remember not to complain if you trade him in and he misses a week after. The talent is undeniable though. Rory Laird, back to his best, 145, 115, 112, 156 and 125 in his last 5. Playing North this week and a very nice captaincy option. All the signs for the desk are looking good. He's in ripping form. Great trading option this week. And in my opinion, a lock for a top 8 average from here. If you do see the buy it now with the 8 ball, that simply means that I think they'll finish top 8 from here on out. Lockie Neal, also in ripping form, a safe selection that delivers most weeks. His last 6 scores have been 109, 128, 122, 102, 144 and 114. So no real ceiling type games apart from 144, but very consistent. Plays Richmond and West Coast in his next 2, which are really nice midfield matchups. Another one to highly consider. The Bont, who I just skipped there, well, look, does he even need discussion? Well, the big discussion you have on your hands this week is whether to use Bont or Lairdy in your captain's loop, because both are playing at the same time, unfortunately. And if you cast your mind back to round 6, the Bont scored a lazy 182 against the Dockers, who he faces at Marvel this week. That history is very hard to go past, but should be a fun week to own many of these premium midfielders. Sam Walsh, well, he's at the lower price end of this range, and for good reason. 92, 105, 72, 93, and 108 in his last 5. That isn't ideal for one of our precious midfield spots, is it? You compare that to the Neils, the Bonds, the Lairds. We've gone through those last 5 round averages, and unfortunately, Walsh just is not cutting it. I'd prefer him over, say, a Steele, Cripps, or Mills type if you are budget hunting, and we'll get to those options in a minute. On to Libba. Opposite end of the scale again from Walsh. I'm a massive fan of Libba, really considering him over track. Only 2 sub-tons, one in round 2, one in round 11, and they were both scores in the 80s. We've seen plenty of captaincy-worthy scores, 126, 139, 140, pair of 141s, and even when the bloke gets tagged, he monsters through, still scores well, has a decent Marvel run, could provide you with a pod captain, and he just never seems to fail on the SuperCoach score sheet. A pod in only 8% of sides, and a player that could potentially move you up the ranks when your opponents don't have him. I highly recommend jumping on if you can. and I just wish that I didn't have to choose between him and Track, but love Libba as a selection. And Andy Brayshaw, another good trading option this week, been hitting hundreds on a regular basis with some nice 125 plus scores thrown in there as well. He was available at 509k in round 7, so really improved his output, and if you jumped on early, you've been really rewarded. Still a decent option at the price, and someone who I'd happily have as my M7. Chad Warner, great player, been in decent form, scored 130 plus last week against the Eagles, but I'd probably rather pay up for Parker instead. Titch is consistent, but nothing sexy. Anderson is an option. The trademark is due back soon. Not sure if that will affect him or not. The difference between an Anderson and a Titch is Anderson's highest ceiling. Parrish came back last week after a fair stint in the sidelines, warmed into things, picked up 24 touches, kicked a goal. Over half of those possessions were contested, which is always a good sign for SuperCoach. That was his lowest possession count for the year, though. Before he went down with injury, he was in really good form. It's just hard to trust his body, isn't it? They're probably safer options. Not that we've seen it this year, but on the upside, he does have a massive ceiling. So if you could snag a couple of those through the back end of the season, you could be absolutely laughing. Led the way for CBAs by plus 11% for Essendon mid, so that's a great sign. He should only get better. Again, though, his durability is always a concern here. Zeret hasn't gone below 105 in the past 5 weeks. 162, 110, 137, 105, and 126 last week. He's broken tags, worked hard when he doesn't have the footy. When he does have the footy, he's been damaging. Got a lovely fixture to end the season as well, so always a good selection there. Sarong, been a little bit quieter lately, but still a solid selection nonetheless. Been battling a niggling ankle complaint, which I think he seems to be over now, but that 3-round average still doesn't fill you with great confidence. But aside from Warner, he's the cheapest out of all the other options here, and a player I'm still keen on. And now, to the great mystery of Clary. Well, the great mystery continues, and I won't get into it now. I traded him out long ago and have now committed to passing on him. For current owners, this has to be one of the most, if not the most, frustrating hold in SuperCoach history, and has robbed some owners of hundreds, thousands of ranking spots in the process. Not selected this week, and no guarantee for the next. Ouch. But the good news is that his teammate, the cement bag, Christian Petrarca, is available at a similar price, and in my opinion, he, along with Libba, is a standout choice if you're looking for an Uber premium. Hasn't really failed all year. Great VC option to loop with the Lairds and the Bonts, and if you've already got Libba as well, has a super SuperCoach finals fixture. It's to die for. He's already feasted on 3 of these opponents this year. He plays North in round 21, who he scored 167 against this year. Then Carlton in round 22, who he scored 159 against. And then he faces Hawks in round 23, where he scored a lazy 148 on in round 9. And to finish it off, he plays the Swans in a tougher matchup, where he still scored 119 earlier this year. So that looks too juicy to pass up. I'm jumping on this week and just cannot wait to own him. On to the midfielders, 250 to 500k, and after an 84 and 95 in rounds 13 and 14, Dev could only manage a 33 this week from the 7 touches. The role really wasn't there, and that really affected his ability to score, but he still has a low break-even, easy hold for another week. There's a chance he can provide cover for the year if he holds his spot, but with Fletcher playing well, Zorko due back in round 17, he'll need to play well to keep his spot. After Copner Corky getting subbed in round 14, Jono came out this week with a bang and almost reached triple figures. Unfortunately, I moved him on last week, which cost me. I could have really used those 99 points, but it is what it is, and it did allow me to complete my team this week. He's one of those players that's fine to hold for now, or even as cover for the rest of the year. At the same time, if he facilitates a move to a midfield premium, move him on without any worries. Ollie Wines, he's really resurrected. Well, you'd say he's resurrected his season after a poor start. I just don't think his body was right, but now seems a lot fitter. Scored a 134 in his last game against Geelong. Before that, 3 scores in the 90s, so not setting the world on fire type stuff, but seems more reliable than your Steele, Cripps, Mills picks in current form. Actually, he's had a really solid season to date, and a bloke that you could keep as cover again for the rest of the season. Has two potentially friendly matchups with the Tigers and the Eagles at the Gabba coming up. I expect him to go bang, particularly against West Coast, so you could even hold for another week or two and then jump on a Mills type if he passes the eye test this week. Or else, like me, and I hate to do it given the fact he's got a nice upcoming run, but I'm trading him to Petrarca. I think this is extremely team dependent, so not one answer that fits all. I still have him winning in the Rising Star for what it's worth, but surely that's some Lions bias there, I think. And now, look, the next three blokes, all right, well, they've all got premium scoring history, captains their respective clubs, but for one reason or another, just haven't hit the heights of previous years. Got Cripper, had a decent comeback game in round 14 and would have enjoyed the rest during the bye, but this is a bit of a hope and a prayer. From rounds 8 to 13, he didn't reach triple figures. 83, 60, 87, 77, 89, and 58 just isn't good enough. Janeth reckons he's carrying something, and it certainly looks like that, to be honest. I'd rather just save a trade, maybe even hold Ashcroft over bringing someone like a Cripper in. He may somehow come good, but I don't really see a reason to trade him in. Jack Steele, he's been a nightmare trade-in for me, but last week, watching him live, he did pass the eye test and was free of some strapping, which was good. Again, didn't set the world on fire. His disposal count's still down, but he looked as comfortable as I've seen him for the past, 3 weeks. So hopefully good signs moving forward. The time to trade was really last week or the week before, so you're probably committing to hold now, but as a buyer, I'd be very careful. I still don't have enough confidence in him to recommend him as an option, even at a bargain price. Just isn't unbelievable. You see these three blokes here in the 400Ks. And Millsy, aka Spills' love child, and you see the new symbol there. You got Spills with love heart as well as the binoculars there, but it's a bit of a drive-by for Janeth as well there after he picked him up and had to trade him out the next week. But he was subbed out just to manage his time last week. Looked okay when he was on ground. Still has a high break even, so my advice is to wait the week like Spills is, and then hopefully jump on around the 400k mark or potentially even lower. That score of 4 will drop out of his price cycle after round 16. I'd be much more comfortable having him as your 9th midfielder rather than an on-field scoring M8, but if you're totally desperate, then he could be a man. On to the midfielders under 250k. Jasper Fletcher, really exciting player, going to be an elite winger for us long term. Super silky, great user, makes good decisions, fantastic runner, more of an outside player but still has a good attack on the ball. A lot of competition for his spot on that wing, so he'll have to perform well to keep his spot each week. I do think he holds at least for this round. Zorko's still a week away, and I see players like Fort and Lohman getting dropped before him, so short term should be okay, but long term I wouldn't necessarily want to rely on him for cover each week. A little bit quieter than his debut game, but still scored a 53, looked comfortable at level. One of only a few players on the bubble this week, so it's not as if we're really spoilt for choices. And Elijah Hewitt is probably your other option, not on the bubble. And if you compare 3 round averages, Fletcher is well on top, but the 17k you save may push your Hewitt's way. Don't expect too much from him though. And as you can see, I don't even have a symbol on him. Nothing seemed to fit, so sorry to say, but the cupboard is pretty bare here, unless you want to go for a one gamer such as a Narkle, but around 200k. On to the big boys in the rucks, and as we've said each week, you need a bit of big kizzer in you. He sits second for season averages in the ruck line behind Timmy English. He just hasn't failed us this year, and in my opinion, he is absolutely a keeper. Really came from the clouds and was a real blessing when Shrek went down. There's a lot of talk about what to do if he is your R3. Do you hold and just trade on one of your other rucks, or do you just move kizzer on? It's a really tough call. Again, team dependent here, but personally, I'd keep him over anyone but English, as you can bank some decent cash, and I think a 5-week sample size from Kizza against the likes of Goldie, etc., that's got me confident enough that he can average as much as your own Marshall, maybe pushing a Wits as well. That may be a big call, but just take that with a grain of salt, as it's just my personal opinion. Rowan does have the Eagles this week though, so a big score may be incoming. If you look at the prices there, you've got Marshall 574, Wits 571, and then Big Kizza at 468. So in both situations there, you are banking over 100k, which really could facilitate another move elsewhere and even complete your side. It may be the difference between getting in, say, Caleb Sarong or getting in a Libba or a Christian Petrarca. So I am all for trading out any one of your rucks apart from probably Timmy English for Big Kizza. If you want to move on English, you can. You'll be banking even more money. But can you really deny English? He's really been one of the biggest scorers of the year so far. Look, apart from that, you've got the two blokes here with DPP. I think, and again, they're a clear top four here. English, Witts, Kizza and Marshall. But with those DPPs in Jackson and DCAM, love DCAM as an F6 so that he can cover up with a Madden loop. And although Jacko has been killing it lately, that price, 563,300, really just puts me off. He's just a little bit too pricey for me. And then the last bloke there we've got is obviously Shrek. So, look, maybe a sneaky move you could look to do in a couple of weeks is to trade Kizza down to Shrek, because he should be more than him. And if Shrek finds form, he could be a bit of a sneaky pod, and you could bank some handy cash if you need it. But for me, I am more than happy to hold Big Kizza. But Shrek, yeah, will be at a pretty friendly price in the next week. On to the forwards, 500k plus, and it seems as if this is the biggest list of forwards we've had in this price range for the year. At the top of the list, well, before we go there, I suppose, we've got four blokes here that are owned by at least 95% of the top 1% ranked coaches, and the drop-off after that is actually quite significant. And those four blokes are obviously Dunkley, Taranto, Goulden and Rosie. I've covered them to within an inch of their life this season, so not much has changed with either pick. Dunkley and Taranto in particular are really putting their hands up for a starting spot in their midfields last year. No chance they retain mid-forward status, so enjoy having these blokes in your forward line for the next 9 weeks. Timmy and Rosie obviously had the bye, and Dunks played a solid game against the Saints, but some low time on ground in the third quarter really cost him 130 plus. And take a look at that price, 700k plus. Here's a 5-round average of over 141, so simply elite there. Goulden dominated the Eagles last week, and his stat sheet was off the chart. He's been a little bit up and down this year, but his ceiling scores really make up for his floor scores. 32 touches, 5 tackles and 3 goals for 164 points is delicious, as old mate Bruce McAvaney would say. Look, Bolton, he's been a yo-yo in the last month. 120, 77, all the way up to 151, down to 856. Seems like you win one week, but lose the next. But in saying that, again, his ceiling scores also average out his floor scores. Zach Butters is a freak, but hasn't really been hurting non-owners of late. He'll be a great pod to finish off with in your forward line if you got the cash. Has a huge ceiling when he's right on, and I expect him to finish as a top 4 forward from here on out. And then we have the two Dogs boys that could certainly lay claims to be top 6 forwards from here on out as well. You could choose to go with 16% of the top 1% coaches and select McRae, or going for more of the lone wolf type move and select the Helmet, who is actually in less than 1% of these sides. Both have DPP, albeit Daniel has defensive forward status, with McRae being a mid forward. Daniel's pumped out some massive scores. In the last 5 weeks, he's gone 144, 117, 169, 125 and 103. McRae's last 5 have been solid as well. Apart from round 14, where he only scored the 81 against North. Maybe a little bit of a surprise there, but other scores include a pair of 144s, a 108 and a 120. Oh, look, you save 40k by going McRae, which may put you over the line, but either way, you should be purchasing a very solid play here. And yeah, at the bottom again, Josh Dunkley, as mentioned before, is an absolute beast and will be my vice captain this week. On to the forwards, 250 to 500k, and at the top we have the big Texan in red hot form at the moment, but can he maintain it? That's a big question. 5 goals last week for 117 points, and in his previous game, he obviously kicked 10 against the Eagles for a 200 plus score. He actually plays North this week, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him kick another bag and be sitting around the 550k mark next week. Do you want him for this week? Absolutely, but would I prefer to have other players ahead of Tex in my side for the last 9 rounds? Probably yes as well. A real risk versus reward pick, but I'm not one that will be making the play. And coming off a 91-93, Angus Sheldrick looks to be an inspired pick for those that jumped on. Short term, clearly the best buy out of him, Robertson and Windhager. Time on ground was right up this week to 73, which is a fantastic sign, and there's no way that they can drop this bloke. He's playing his role perfectly. I think the ship has probably sailed on this one though, and remember that they won't play West Coast each week and win by 150 plus points, but should be great cover for now, and you just look to keep him, I think, for the rest of the year. Trent Cotchin would have enjoyed the rest last week. The week before in his 300th game prior to the bye, we just saw vintage Cotchin, 127, scored a 95 the week before that, so in nice recent form, but the issue is that apart from that 127, has not turned up all year. From rounds 10 to 12, he averaged 54, so even though his price looks juicy, he's had an extremely average season, but this sort of decline is expected for his age and never really been a realistic Supercoach selection anyway. Terran Thomas isn't the best bloke, but he could be a decent Supercoach swing as your 23rd man. Had the bye last week, but his last 3 games before that were scores of 89, 112 and 75. A really awkward type price, but just another name to throw out there. Benny Keys. Very, very keen on Benny Keys, and so is Janeth as well. Previous to this week, he had 300 plus scores on the trot with 102, 106 and 115. His CBA numbers were looking good, 70%, 75%, but then a bit lower to 55%. And that was a slight concern because this pick is all about the midfield role. A few jumped on as a bit of roll the dice type selection, and in the short term, it seems to have paid off because last week against the Pies, Keezy had a season high CBA rate of 78%, an equal season high disposal count of 29, and that led to a season high score of 119. It was a big match for Keezy. All these season highs, took the goals off Coxie, apparently shit his pants at some stage during the match as well. It was all happening for Benny. It seems like Nixie's preferred midfield mix is Dawson, Laird and Keys, and if that continues, he will be a fine selection. However, if he finds himself playing more of that half-forward role, all of a sudden, his average will go down the drain. But there's enough for me to suggest that he continues to play that midfield role. And at 462k with DPP, that is still a very decent price. And if you've got the luxury of having him as your 23rd player, then that is absolutely ideal because I'm pretty confident in the role he can go 100 to 105 plus from here. Isaac Heaney, well, he beat up on West Coast, didn't he, with a big 150, but it was only his third 100 plus for the year. Also scored a 101 against Freo from 18 touches and a couple of goals in round 9. Another big one against the Tigers back in round 5 with 144. But aside from that, lots of scores in the 70s, 80s, and the consistency just isn't there for me. I'd rather take the punt on Keezy. Cogs had the bye last week, and before that had a 103 and a 112, so finding some Supercoach form, which is nice. The Tomahawk, he'll be the main man up forward, won't he, for the Cats this week with Jezza out, but they demolished the Swans at the category last time, but I expect a much better performance from the Swannies at the SCG this week. Averaging only 2 goals a game, or under 2 goals a game during the last 7 weeks. No 100 plus scores since his really big monster in round 7. But in saying that, he has delivered a 151 and a 184. So if you get Tommy on the right week as that F7 loop, he could really reward you. Jay-Z is a hold for me, unless he's your biggest question mark and you're already full premium. But if you've held him up until now, your plan probably was to hold him anyway. And unfortunately, it is time to say goodbye to Humphrey B. Bear. Sexy Flanders took his role last week, and the Bear just couldn't get near it. Bloody Flanders didn't get to the heights of 450k, but he's done his job well, and I thank him very much for his service. I've got a feeling in a few years' time that he could enter our sides again as a premium, and I'm looking forward to that because he's been a super fun own, super talented player. You could keep him as cover if you like, but with a break even of 120, he's the perfect avenue to downgrade or upgrade to complete your team. And I think the other issue is that if he continues with this forward pocket type role, just say for 2 more weeks, by the time you realise to yourself, well, maybe he's not great cover, he's probably lost enough cash that you can't do much with him. So for me, the time to sell is now. Bye-bye, Humphrey, but thank you very much for your service, lad. And we'll finish off with the forwards under 250k. 4 names here. At the top, we have Harvey Harrison. I was actually a little bit surprised to see him keep his spot last week, but well done to the young man. Averaging 54, that's all good for a bench spot, but I do worry about his lack of DPP and job security moving forward. That will continue to remain sketchy in my opinion. As a trade-in, I think you've missed the boat, but for owners, hopefully he keeps his spot. Kyle Lohmann, a talented player out of contract, and I see him as hopefully our long-term Lincoln McCarthy replacement. At the time of recording, teams are yet to be announced, but I think the young fella may be in trouble. I'd avoid as a trade-in option, but I suppose if his name could go there, but I just don't like the elevated price. Marriage had a shocker along with basically every one of his teammates on the weekend. Close to an empty stat sheet, scraped to 16 odd points, but hopefully not someone you really need to rely on too much, if at all. The fact he's 102k and playing may be enough for people to bring him in if he facilitates one of your final upgrades. And Windy, I bought him in last week and was really disappointed. Played some wing time, tagged Neil for a bit, but after leading the Saints for CBAs a week before, they were right down. Tog was down, and it was actually mentioned by Ross in his presser that he had a down game, so hopefully he's given a chance to redeem himself, but clearly the best option here was Sheldrick. I wouldn't be investing in Windhagen now. Hopefully he can keep his spot and provide us with some half-decent cover moving forward until the end of the season. So that's it for now, guys. All the best of luck with your trade-ins and your trade-outs for this week, and I'll see you soon in the next one. Cheers, bye.